I'm here.
Okay, great. Larry, thanks so much. A bit of a technical issue there.
That must be the audience.
No, it's I don't think technology is your strong suit. Great
No,
lawyer, but
it's
it's
worse.
okay. Who
It's
knows? Maybe
worse.
the
It's Bill
Iranians are
Maher and his
hacking
law
us. Yeah, who knows?
firm.
Maybe
Okay.
the Iranians are hacking us. Larry, it's great to have you on. I don't know if you caught the tail end of my previous segment there talking about the importance of litigation financing and whatnot. But we were talking about how there's efforts right now to try to kill off litigation financing by taxing it out of existence. And I was just talking about how important it is for people, everyday Americans, people who aren't billionaires, people who aren't millionaires, people who have been taken advantage of by corporations or screwed over, defamed by media networks, have the ability to file a lawsuit if they ever need to file a lawsuit for the sake of getting justice and accountability. And we've seen with this recent election how our justice system has been completely weaponized and how there there's a lot of corruption. You've written books about this. I know that you're no stranger to this. You've been a lawyer for decades in our country fighting against the corrupt legal system. And I guess I found myself now dealing with, in my opinion, what is a very corrupt situation. And I wanted to bring you on so that you could explain to my viewers what is happening in my own lawsuit against Bill Maher. Because last time I checked, when you're involved in a deposition, your own deposition is allowed to be released to the public. And now we have been contacted by Bill Maher and by HBO this week informing us that my deposition, for some reason, that I flew all the way to Washington, D.C. to record under oath, is not allowed to be disclosed publicly. Even though when I walked into the deposition in the law firm, Davis, Wright, and Tremaine, which is an anti-Trump law firm that has represented CNN in lawsuits against Trump. They represented George Stephanopoulos in the lawsuit that President Trump recently filed against him. Ultimately, Stephanopoulos had to settle with President Trump for $15 million. Right? These are people who openly advertise that they are anti-Trump in order to solicit clients. Now they're telling me that I'm not allowed to release my own deposition. And I figured, what better way to highlight the corruption in our judicial system than to bring my own lawyer on to talk about this ridiculous update in my own lawsuit?
Well, you're right, Laura, and it goes all the way back to refresh people's recollection without being off color. You were defamed by Bill Maher because he wanted to get to Donald Trump during the election. He supported Kamala Harris, claimed she was a shoe-in to win, and used you as the vehicle to defame Donald Trump by saying, and I'll clean it up because Bill Maher is a low-class degenerate, frankly. I'll clean it up and say that you slept with the president behind the back of Melania and committed adultery. Now, they tried to dismiss that case. They failed. And even before that happened, we had sent them an email and a letter saying to mitigate the damage that you've caused to my client, Laura Loomer, that's my law firm, Claimant Law Group PA, that you should retract this, you should apologize and put her on the air during an episode of Real Time. And they, of course, refused arrogantly. Now, their arrogance is unbelievable. They can smear you in front of millions of viewers. They can harm you. It's hurt you financially. It's hurt your reputation, your goodwill. It's prevented you from opportunities because people view you as radioactive unfairly, totally unfairly. It's because you're so effective. And now they moved the court that even your own deposition should be kept from the public. It can only be used in the context of litigation, unless it's attached to a pleading. And believe me, it will be attached to a pleading. But we have a video, and the video should be released. The court should have ordered it. It's going to be up on appeal. A magistrate judge made that ruling. No aspersions towards the magistrate judge. I don't want to anger the judiciary over there. But he will be, I believe, reversed by the judge in chief. And we're going to be pursuing that. But more importantly than that, you're right. How can they prevent you from releasing your own deposition? And what is
It's
that
kind of funny.
deposition?
It's funny because, when we walked into the deposition, and I guess stop me, right? If I'm not allowed to disclose the contents of my deposition. But we walk into the deposition and there's this whole, discussion about what part is going to be, public and what part isn't going to be public. And of course, anything that contains your personal information has to be private. And personal information, of course, is, your address or your bank information, things like that. And so the lawyer, her name is Kate Bollinger, who works for Davis, Wright, and Tremaine, this very liberal law firm, was so adamant about how all of this was going to be public and everybody was going to see it and it was going to be on the record and the tapes were going to be available to be posted. And now all of a sudden they don't want it to be released. And the only reason why they wouldn't want my own deposition to be released is because, well, I outperformed them in my own deposition and they thought that they were going to try to make a fool of me, but at the end, they're the ones that looked like fools because they falsely accused me of having sex with Donald Trump. They have no evidence whatsoever. And now I'm having to waste my own money trying to get justice. And some people will say, well, that's your fault. You're the one that filed the lawsuit. Well, again, it goes to my point. At what point are people not allowed to get justice or accountability from the powerful elites? At what point can people not stand up and try to fundraise for, the costs associated with their litigation? Are people supposed to be financially ruined in this country because of lies that are spread about them? I'm a young woman, right? Why should I be falsely accused of having an affair with somebody just because they don't like me? They don't like my investigative journalism. They don't like the fact that I'm on good terms with the president. And they don't like the fact that the president absolutely obliterated Kamala Harris during the presidential campaign. And so, what has happened to me could happen to any of you as you're watching tonight. And it's just an abomination because really litigation in this country is so expensive. And most people can't afford it. Most people can't afford to get justice when they find themselves getting screwed over. But even if you try to get the funds needed for your litigation, you encounter all types of judicial corruption or all types of sleazy tactics to really deprive individuals, myself included, of getting justice. And you've been my lawyer for many years now, Larry, so you know that this isn't the first time that I've gone up against somebody who is extremely powerful and extremely wealthy. But it's becoming increasingly harder in this country for people to get justice. And at some point in time, I think people are just going to lose all faith whatsoever in the DOJ and lose all faith whatsoever in our justice system, especially as they watch the judicial coup happening in our own country.
Well, you're right. And see, they don't want your deposition to come out because Kate Bolger, that's her name, of Davis, Wright, Tremaine, yes, they advertise until we called them on it that they're anti-Trump. I had an article written in the Hollywood Reporter about that. I've been up against them many times. They're leftists. When I went into the Davis, Wright in New York, I couldn't even figure out what bathroom to go to. I mean, you couldn't. They had three sexes. I couldn't figure out which one was which. I mean, these are the people you're dealing with here. But they browbeat you at the deposition, them and two other women. And they didn't want that to be put out in a video because it would show, frankly, just, how improper and unethical they have behaved. Same thing with Maher when we deposed him. They were comatose that might be released because it shows the real Bill Maher acting like he's the Joker in Batman. And believe me, he's not funny. He's not a comedian. He's a pundit. I never found him funny. I was on a show years ago before it became so vile as it is today. And it's okay to smear and to harm Laura Loomer, but it's not okay to have a video deposition of Bill Maher or even yourself released to the public. So we'll be challenging this, if necessary, all the way up to the Supreme Court. They need to see this. They need to see what you're dealing with. And it's important, you're right. You, Laura, are sitting on our department along with other prominent people, including Nancy Mace and others, and Alan Keyes, former ambassador, our Department of Judicial and Legal Accountability. We need to revise this legal system. People have lost total confidence in it. And it's not just President Trump, but it's everyone.
Well, it's just totally backwards. Even today, we saw just the absolute insanity of our broken justice system, where you have President Trump who filed, he issued a deportation order for Mahmoud Khalil, right? The State Department issued a deportation order for Mahmoud Khalil, who is one of the Muslim individuals in our country who was involved in organizing these violent pro-Hamas protests at Columbia University. And they had him in an ICE detention facility in Louisiana. And then a judge tried saying that, the Trump administration couldn't deport him. So this deportation was halted, even though he's a Syrian national. And then he's held in ICE detention. And now he was released today. Just imagine this, right? He is a pro-Hamas Muslim on a visa in our country. He's not even a US citizen. He was supposed to be deported, and now he's been released back into the public where who knows, he could be radicalized. He could be recruited as an Iranian proxy to carry out an act of terrorism. He may feel a sense of revenge. He may want to try to get revenge by carrying out an attack in our country. You don't know. It just is very dangerous to release an individual like Mahmoud Khalil back into the streets of America, back into society. And what is he doing? What is the first thing that this guy is doing upon being released back into society after being released from this detention facility? He's back at Columbia chanting globalize the intifada, promoting terrorist propaganda. And so again, how are people supposed to feel a sense of security or have confidence in our justice system when they're watching all of these radical judges get away with carrying out a judicial coup? I mean, if President Trump can't get justice, how can somebody like myself get justice? How can everyday Americans get justice? And I know that you've represented all types of clients. I was just talking to my previous guest, Ashley Keller, a trial lawyer, about how litigation financing is used to help people get justice, especially for this is something you have experience with, suing terrorist organizations, Americans who have been either killed by terrorist organizations or had family members who were killed by terrorist organizations, right? Suing governments that enabled or funded these terrorist organizations, or suing these terror organizations like Hamas and the PLO or the IRGC themselves. And this is something that you've done. Perhaps you can speak to that. But it just seems like no matter how egregious the crime is, no matter how egregious a case is, it seems like the criminals and the guilty parties are being favored in our justice system.
You're right. And it's the federal judges. They're appointed, they're politicians in robes. They're very politicized. They get on the bench generally with large campaign contributions. You can guess with almost exact certainty how they're going to rule based on who appointed them. They're like clowns in a Stephen King movie, frankly. I mean, they are very, very dangerous. And it was Thomas Jefferson who said he was against federal judges. Unelected, unaccountable to the people, they would become despots and tyrants, causing us to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants yet again every 20 years or so. He didn't want to see violence, either do I. But it's gotten to the point where it's key. Look, there was a judge the other day in San Francisco. They know where to file cases, the left, that enjoined Trump from sending the National Guard to Los Angeles. Even the Ninth Circuit had to reverse that leftist judge. This is what you're dealing with. And fortunately, we have our case in Ocala, Florida. It's a very favorable venue. The judge in that case, not the magistrate judge who just, basically put a seal on everything, but the actual judge himself that sits atop him, allows the case to go forward. It will go to trial. It's an easy case. It's not confidential. There's no reason that anything should be kept off the public record. And yet you can have your reputation destroyed and harmed among certain quarters. Of course, our supporters know otherwise. But yet, Bill Maher's deposition can't be made public, and your own cannot be made public. And this is why, you need to be supported. And if you're interested in this case, you can go to LarryKlayman.com. I'm handling this in my private capacity. Freedom Watch obviously has been fighting against this for years. I founded Judicial Watch because of this in 1994, watching judges. That's what it's about. So this is important. Your case will go to trial, Laura. It's going to go to trial in a very religious area of this country. I don't think they're going to be real happy with Bill Maher. And if anybody wants to see who Bill Maher is, go out on X and look at his tweets. Look at how disgusting they are. Look at how he hates women. He's a misogynist.
He hates Trump.
He's never been married for good reason. I mean, who would marry the guy? I mean, if you're a woman, I guess there's an opportunity to go the other way.
Yeah.
But this guy is really bad news. And, he picked on you, not so much because it was you, because he wanted to get to Trump.
Well, he, is not a great guy. He's He seems to think that he's above the law. And that's what's really interesting is that for a Democrat Party that loves to screech, nobody's above the law. They scream this at President Trump and his supporters in the aftermath of J6, and they scream this all throughout the presidential campaign when they were indicting President Trump over and over again. They don't seem to have any regard for the law. And so, how unprecedented is it for somebody to have their own deposition sealed and for somebody to be denied the ability to release their own deposition? Because I never heard of this happening before until you just updated me
Do you remember,
this
Laura?
week. I've never heard of this. I'm honestly so shocked. I can't believe that I'm not able to release my own deposition, because I was going to release my own deposition to the public so people could see firsthand how
Well,
I answered all the questions.
it's likely to happen. We just have to go up to the higher judge here. But do you remember when I was fighting the Clintons years ago? You're a lot younger than I am. You may not have a complete memory of it, but I would take depositions of everyone: Stephanopoulos, Carville, Mac McClarty, White House Chief of Staff, you name it. And they would be released the same day, and you'd see vignettes of them, little clips of them on cable news every night. They're American proceedings. We're not like King George III, who did things in star chambers, secret with his corrupt judges. We have a system in our country where people will be able to see what goes on in our justice system. Open justice. It's not supposed to be secret behind closed doors. And that's particularly true with regard to your own deposition. You have the right to release it. Now, we're not going to do it right now. It'll be attached in transcript form to a motion that I'm going to file in the next few days to hold Kate Bolger and her colleagues accountable for harassing you and browbeating you and making objections during depositions to tip off the witnesses to answers. I've deposed HBO, the corporate representative. I've deposed Marr. This is what she does. This is a firm that I've fought against for many years. They're unethical. They don't know how to tell the truth. They're liars. And they frankly could care less. And can you imagine, three women sitting there allowing Kate Bolger to browbeat you, women, after you have been defamed as a woman and dragged through the mud? I mean, what can be more despicable than that? I've always been in my career. You're right. I've been practicing for decades. I don't accept any client to represent. And I would not have accepted this case if I really believed in the rights of women and not to defend a misogynist and a sexist. And that's what he is. Go look at his tweets. Look at his views on women, and you were the victim.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Well, any comments, any thoughts about this ruling to release Mahmoud Khalil? I know that you yourself have been involved in litigation trying to get justice for victims of Hamas and victims of other Islamic terrorist organizations. What are your thoughts on these judges ruling?
Well, you're right.
For Mahmoud Khalil, who has been involved, he's not even a United States citizen, been involved in these protests that are favorable to Hamas, releasing this dangerous individual back onto the streets of America. Also, too, they announced today that they're releasing Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's an illegal alien, back into the streets of America. So, up is down, down is up. It's unbelievable what is happening in our country. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this as somebody
You're right, Laura. Just a little background. I've sued the supreme leader before for Akbar Mohammadi, the first student leader to call for regime change. He was mutilated. His body, went through the streets of Tehran celebrating that. His brother, manager, whose genitals were mutilated. I still have a case pending for the victims, families of Extortion 17 against Iran. I have a default against them. These people are dangerous people. Most Iranians in this country are good people. They're industrious. They basically built Beverly Hills, for instance. And I have a couple of them who are my doctors, Iranian Jews. But the Iranians and the type of Khalil, these are radical people. These are people who present a clear and present danger to the United States. And any judge that would let that person out on the streets, frankly, should be removed as a judge. He's not engaging in good behavior. By the way, there's no constitutional right to life tenure in the Constitution for federal judges. It's serving for good behavior. It doesn't exist. Yet we have a judiciary committee run by Jim Jordan, who hasn't called one judge up. in 8 years, actually longer than that, 9 years. He's not a lawyer. He could still call them up, call them in the carpet, have them start impeachment proceedings and get that underway. He'd rather go on Fox News and fundraise. This is what you're dealing with. And this is why you are sitting on a committee with regard to Freedom Watch that will take action against these judges with citizens' grand juries, citizens' trials, holding them accountable. And we need to do something because without a legal system that functions, then this case is going, the country is going to go into a very violent state, and we don't want to see that.
As somebody who has sued the Iranian regime and sued the supreme leader, and somebody who has sued Hamas and has tried to get justice for the families of victims of these terrorist organizations, what are your thoughts about President Trump's strike on Iran's nuclear facilities?
I think he did the right thing. I think it was fantastic that he did that. I was pushing him to do it. Mark Levin was pushing him to do it. We had these rhinos and Tucker Carlson wing of the Republican Party that were, trying to scare him. Charlie Kirk all of a sudden has become a fan of doing it. Just 3 days ago, he wasn't. Okay, this is what we were dealing with. But the president did the right thing. Now he needs to take care of the regime. And I think he's got that in their sights. They need to be eliminated, for lack of a better word. It's like a cockroach. If you leave one cockroach in your home, the colony is going to grow back. Now is the time to get rid of the leadership, not the Iranian people, but the leadership.
The Iranian people are great people. The Iranian people love Trump. They love, Western civilization. They're oppressed. These people have been fighting for freedom for a very long time, and it seems like that's why they have to shut off the internet, right? That's why they have to shut off the internet, and people are begging Elon Musk to turn on Starlink in Iran because they don't want the Iranian people seeing how weak the regime is. They don't want the Iranian people seeing what President Trump just did to the nuclear facilities, because now is probably the best time, if there was ever a time, to have freedom, to secure freedom. If you are the Iranian people, now would be the most ideal time to rise up and overthrow the Iranian regime.
Well, I think we ought to help them with that. During Obama, we had an opportunity in 2009. He didn't. The Voice of America was a propaganda network for Iran. They actually had the son of a Ayatollah running it. I think the United States should not sit back and just wait for the Iranians to do it. I think we need to help them, and I think President Trump will do that, and that's his intention. If you don't do it now, it's kind of like John McEnroe when he played tennis. You get somebody down 5-0, you finish them off, because they will rise again if you let them get up. Already we know that they took the enriched uranium at 60% and took it out of Fordo and took it out of Isfahan and took it out of Natanz. They took it out. They still are a threat. You need to eliminate the leadership. And frankly, I hope no one gets hurt. But I actually hope that the Iranians do provoke President Trump and give him the green light to take them all out. Because that is the intention, I believe, of President Trump. And it certainly is the intention of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Well, we have a post from President Trump that he posted earlier today. It said, "MEGA, make Iran great again." And he talked about how, well, if the Iranian people are not going to come to the table for peace, and the Iranian people are not, or the Iranian supreme leader, excuse me, if the Iranian people want peace and the Iranian supreme leader is not going to come to the table to, change his ways, then let's pull this up on the screen. It says, "It is not politically correct to use the term regime change. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again," and of course, President Trump is talking about not just, the demilitarization and the denuclearization, but also, too, actual change in Iran where they stop oppressing the people, they stop chanting death to America, they stop threatening to nuke the West, they stopped threatening to nuke Israel. Then he said, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Make Iran great again. He's not saying the United States is going to get involved, but he's saying, why wouldn't there be? If the current Iranian regime is not going to make Iran great again, you used to see in the 1970s women in Iran dancing in the streets, wearing bikinis, beautiful women, beautiful, gorgeous women, some of the most beautiful women you'll ever see in your life, free, happy, in a bustling society. And now they're all covered in burqas and hijabs and beaten to death in the streets if they take their hijabs off. So Again, that's what President Trump is talking about. If they are not willing to make Iran great again and go back to the time where Iran was a bustling society and people were free, people were happy, people had rights, then ultimately the people are going to have to implement regime change. And so I don't really understand all these conservatives who are attacking President Trump as being a neocon. Do they want the Iranian people to continue to live in oppression for eternity? I'm not saying that the United States is going to be responsible for this regime change, but why are people so opposed to the Iranian people taking advantage of this opportune time to rise up and take their country back?
No, you're right, Laura. And Iran has the capability,
They have
the
the
promise
ability
of
now. They do.
being one of our best allies and one of Israel's best allies. And if you make that regime change, that's going to bring Saudi Arabia to a final peace agreement with Israel. The Gulf states will follow. They view Iran as a huge threat. The Sunnis hate the Shiites hate them. The Saudis and the Gulf countries are Sunnis. So consequently, it makes sense to take them out. But I don't think we should just sit back and wait for the Iranian people. We should help them. We should frankly arm them. And you cannot equate the Iranian people to the Iraqis, who were very unsophisticated, uneducated, etc. The Iranian people are very sophisticated. If you get rid of the Ayatollah and his henchmen, they will certainly fill the vacuum. It won't be another Iraq.
Any last thoughts? Any last comments, Larry? I know that well, in terms of, I want to be careful about what I say about my own case. Obviously, things are pending right now, but we're going to be providing updates as things progress, as we get more updates from the judge as it relates to my case against Bill Maher. But as it stands, it's looking like I'm going to go to trial. It's looking like this is going to go all the way to trial.
It will go to trial, Laura, and it's going to trial in Ocala, Florida, where you had your campaign office. It's going to Florida in the Bible Belt, and it's an area that actually respects Judeo-Christian ethics and values. And I'm going to put up on our website at larryclayman.com in the morning a pleading that I wrote. It's public, and it says what's been going on here. People should read it, and you can see how Laura is being treated, terribly.
And we'll bring Larry back on too. We're going to bring you back on the show to talk about it as the case proceeds. But it's just another example. Every single day, there's so many stories, and God only knows how many people are being subjected to the same type of treatment by our justice system. And the reality is it's too many cases in one day to cover them all. And it's just a very sad state of affairs that this is the state of our justice system in this country. But hopefully there's able to be some type of judicial reformation in our country over these next 3.5 years, because if we're not able to get the judicial coup, we're not able to get the attack on our justice system and attack on accountability. Really, that's what it is. It's an attack on accountability. The elites of our country are trying to deprive everyday people of being able to get any sense of accountability. If we don't fix it over these next 3.5 years, then that's it, because we're in the strongest position now than ever before to address accountability issues and to address the lack of justice. And I'm not just talking about myself or President Trump. Who's gone to jail, right? We haven't seen any of the people involved in Crossfire Hurricane. We haven't seen any of the people involved in the attacks on President Trump, the people who were at the center of trying to steal the 2020 election. The FBI just released a report the other day. I don't know if you saw this big story, that they believe that there was CCP involvement, printing of ballots, illegal ballots to help steal the election in 2020. So where's the accountability? Who is going to go to jail, right? Where is the accountability? How come the Butler report hasn't been released yet? There's so many things as it relates to our justice system. And it's so funny. It's called the Department of Justice. It should be called the Department of Injustice. There's so many examples on a day-to-day basis. It's like a fire hose, it's so hard to keep track of everything. It's very overwhelming. Every day I try to keep track of all the updates in President Trump's cases and all these federal judges that are trying to have a judicial coup in the executive branch. And it's so overwhelming. And that's just pertaining to these federal cases involving the president. Think of all the other people that are being screwed over in our justice system. It's something that we focus on a lot here at Loomer Unleashed, and I just find it to be very overwhelming.
Well, it is. And if the American people, years ago when I was at Judicial Watch, which I founded, I had a show in New York City and I talked about judges and how they behave and how they harm people if they're not careful. We have a plan to get better judges. But the people actually rose up off their chairs. It was like a Jerry Springer daytime show. Everybody's experienced it in the family court system and, with conservatorships and everything else. They see the injustice and they see how money talks and nobody walks. These federal judges, there's some good ones, but by and large, they're bought and paid for by the special interests. Lobbyists put their names forward. President Trump criticized the Federalist Society a few weeks ago for the judges that they asked him to appoint. He relied upon them, and now these judges are ruling against him. It's a club. They protect each other. And President Trump has now had, and the administration, about 250 plus lawsuits filed against them in leftist areas of this country, whether it's Boston, whether it's Seattle, whether it's Portland, whether it's Chicago. About 60 to 70% have wound up with preliminary injunctions. They're trying to run out the clock, because he only has now another 3.5 years left. And this is their strategy. And, you're supposed to, when you file a case in federal court, it's supposed to be assigned randomly. I don't believe that happens in most instances. This clown Boasberg, James Boasberg in D.C., has gotten the last 3 or 4 cases involving Trump. He's the Chief Justice.
So unprecedented. It's so unprecedented for one judge to be assigned 4 cases involving the same individual. I mean, if you can just speak on that briefly before you go, because I don't think people understand how unprecedented that is.
There's more probability that there's life on Mars than that would happen. Okay, it's mathematically impossible. So it's also corrupt what goes on in the clerk's office.
Also at the same time, it's not like 4 cases over the span of 4 years or so. It's all at the same time.
Exactly, back to back.
Back to back.
So this is what we've impeached basically one judge in the last many years, Alice Hastings from Miami. We're from Florida, Laura. The guy, when he was impeached, then ran for Congress, claimed it was a racial witch hunt against him, was elected and was in Congress ever since. He died, the last few years. But this is the nature. Eight judges have been impeached in 250 years in this country, roughly speaking. And it's unbelievable. And they were impeached just for drunkenness and not showing up for work, basically. Are we to believe that judges are any more honest than any other man or woman? That's what Jefferson said. Are we to believe that they don't take bribes? Are we to believe that everything's done up and up? No. But even apart from that, the political affiliation of a judge will tell you almost with exact certainty. You can see the rulings at the Supreme Court, how they're going to rule. Forget about the law. Forget about the Constitution. They'll rule the way they want. And then if you call them on it, if they do something unethical, the complaint goes to judges in the same courthouse and they throw it in the trash. I'm talking about federal judges. Now in Florida, we elect judges, and by and large, the judges are fairly decent because they're accountable to the people in the state system. But in the federal system, they're unaccountable to the people. And they have, like Jefferson predicted, become despots and tyrants. He was against federal judges.
Absolutely. Well, Larry, we're going to have you back on the program to talk about this because it's not like this judicial coup is going to be stopping anytime soon. But in the meantime, where can people follow you?
They can go to 2 places, LarryKlayman.com, to read about Laura's case. And there are aspects of what we do at Freedom Watch which also touch on Laura. We went all the way to the Supreme Court, for instance, with regard to social media. They go to freedomwatchusa.org, and we would appreciate the support. We need more lawyers. We need more paralegals. We need to be able to help more people that don't have the opportunity to afford lawyers themselves.
Absolutely, Larry. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for everything you're doing in my lawsuits. I appreciate it. And we'll bring you back soon. Thanks so much for coming on.
You're a great friend and a great client, and your worth, Laura, is, you don't even have to say what it is anymore. When the President of the United States basically has an opportunity to have you in his office at will, you know how important Laura Loomer is. So you can forget about the Bill Maher's and everybody else. What they tell you is complete nonsense.
Well, I appreciate that. It's very nice of you to say. I do what I can. I try to support President Trump, and I try to do what's best for my country and America first. And there's so many people that are trying to stop President Trump and work against his agenda. But at the end of the day, truth always prevails, and we just have to keep on fighting. You just can't ever give up. You have to fight, 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 as President Trump says, and never ever give up.
Well, let's pray for President Trump and Vice President Vance and people in the cabinet because what happened at Butler, God forbid, but it's probably not going to be the last time, and we
It's
need to
not.
protect him.
And, the Iranians have tried to assassinate President Trump multiple times now. I predict that's one of the reasons why they haven't released all these reports, is because it pertains to issues of national security. But President Trump had two assassination attempts, and he said in multiple interviews and multiple posts that he has reason to believe that Iran was behind those. And I know for a fact, speaking to members of the Trump campaign, that several of them, including his campaign manager, had to have armed security outside of his home towards the last few weeks of the campaign because the Iranians were also trying to assassinate some of President Trump's campaign staff. So this is a real threat, and we have to fix our country. We have to deport these illegals. We have to deport the jihadis, and we need to really fight back against these judges and expose these judges who are trying to prevent President Trump from completing his mission and doing what we, the American people, voted for him to do.
Yeah, and you can read about our Department of Judicial and Legal Accountability at freedomwatchusa.org. It's kind of like a compliment to Doge. Something needs to be done. And we need to help the Justice Department. They're overwhelmed, the Trump Justice Department. They need help from we the people. But one other thing, last thought, Laura. President Trump was very, very shrewd in the way he used legitimate situation ethics and deception against Iran with regard to the attack yesterday. Make no mistake about it, he wants to eliminate the entire leadership, and so does Netanyahu, and that's something that needs to be done.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Larry. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay.
See you soon.
Stay safe.
You too.